and welcome. If you want to put in the chat box where you're joining us from today and make sure that you can access the PD certificate that should be in the chat, that would be great. I am joining from Missouri on a really nice day, actually. Hi, and welcome. If you want to access the chat box for me and just double check that you have the certificate available to you. If not, I will repost it for you. And just drop in the chat box where you're from, how it's going. It's a really great day here in Missouri. I walked outside for a little bit and it's about like 60 almost. It's kind of unheard of for February this time of year. Pretty excited. Wow, Puerto Rico. How's it down there? A lot of rain. Williamsport, Pennsylvania. What's it like in Pennsylvania right now? Is it like abnormally warm there too, or are you still cold fronts? Sunny and nice. I love it. Great February day. It's kind of nice. We've had some pretty wacky February. Well, ours has been a little wacky this February, the whole 5 days. Um, January was insanely cold. All right, so in about a minute, we're gonna get started. And then we will continue on. So just make sure you can access that certificate for the professional development today for the webinar. If you can't, just put in the chat box and let me know and I'll try to repost it for you. And it should work. Just double checking. Okay, you can't, no worries. I will try to repost it. We had this issue in the last webinar. And somebody pointed it out. So we just sent it out afterwards again. So if this doesn't work, don't worry. I'll let our IT department know and we'll send you the link with to the email that you sent it to. So you will get access to this, I promise. So if this doesn't work, please do not panic. I will make sure you get this. All right. So it's about 2 o'clock. I'm going to get started, and people who jump in, we'll just catch them up. So thank you so very much for coming today. I am going to get us started with kind of getting a bell ringer going. So we're going to dive into our Understanding by Design Stage 1. And welcome to our webinar series. This is going to be fast. It's going to be furious. It's going to be interactive. It's going to be a crazy 30 minutes, but it's going to be amazing. Grab your smart devices because we will have some QR codes that'll take us to different learning activities. But if you don't have your phone or you're distracting a small child with it or whatever else is the case, I will be putting links in the chat as well. So no worries there. You'll be able to access learning activities that way too. So are you ready? Because it's going to get exciting. Okay, so scan the QR code using the camera on your phone, or there's a link that I'm going to post in the chat that you can click on. And give me 1 second. Clicking 2 things at once is always a little crazy. Okay. So here's the link. You can either scan this QR code, or you can click the link in the chat box. And you're going to answer the question, what do you remember about understanding by design in general? So if you were in our last session, it might be the stages, it might be key principles, it might be a definition. If you haven't thought about it in years, it might be an example, it might be something you've covered somewhere else, or it might be, I don't remember, I haven't studied this ever, or not since college. So whatever your answer is, that's fine. We're going to use a strategy called a bell ringer. Now you can access Mentimeter by either clicking the link or scanning the QR code. So a bell ringer strategy you use at the beginning of your class, your course, your session, and it's just to get people engaged and thinking about your material and what they're doing and get away from what they were just thinking about. So you can use Mentimeter in your classrooms by checking with your IT department first to make sure it's actually available for you to use. It's a great free interactive tool that educators can use to focus interactivity and collaboration between people. All right, so we have the importance of being deliberate with respect to assessing. Love that. That's amazing. Developing for student understanding. Perfect. Excellent definitions. Those are both 100% correct. So as you can see, we have a couple different definitions. One involves students, one involves assessing involves students. So we're kind of coming up to some related ideas here. And our official understanding by design definition, I want to make sure we have it really solidified the foundations before we get started in stage 1 work. So understanding by design is an educational framework developed by Wiggins and McTighe, so research based on what they did. It's an educational framework focused on designing curriculum, instruction, and assessments to promote that deep understanding and meaningful learning that we so search for as teachers. The key principles are backwards by design. We go backwards, top to bottom, or bottom to top, sorry. We endure understandings, we have essential questions, and we have authentic assessments. There's 3 stages. We're talking about stage 1 today. So we're going to talk today about identifying our desired results. We're going to determine evidence in stage 2. And then in stage 3, we plan our learning experiences and instruction. So now that we have some background information, we're kind of getting in the UBD mindset. My name is Meredith Llewellyn. I'm an instructional design specialist at Goodheart-Willcox Publisher. Just for some background information, I've been a classroom teacher. I was in technology and LMS trainer. I've been PD presenters and focusing on effective pedagogy and instructional design. So that's just a little bit about me. This is going to be fast-paced, guys, really, really fast. And we're going to take interactivity and deep dive, so it's going to be kind of a wacky next 25 minutes, it looks like. So please, if you want a deeper dive, we're going to talk about the next 2 stages, and I'll give you those dates later on. So this is just stage 1 because there's so much to talk about. Because this topic today is over identifying our desired results, we're going to start by identifying our learning outcomes for this session. So our learning outcomes today are to be able to use standards to identify and prioritize big ideas and goals, generate and use essential questions and understandings, and then look into our own teaching and develop a short plan on how we can actually utilize it where we currently are. Not in a year, but tomorrow, what could you do? So scan this QR code using the camera on your phone, or I'm going to post another link in the chat box. And give me a second to do that. It takes a minute to click and talk at the same time. Sorry, guys, hold on. Technical difficulty. Okay, that one worked. All right. And it's going to take you to a tool in Padlet. And within Padlet, you're going to answer, what do you need to do before you go on a trip to a new destination, a new location, a place you've never been before? So you'll click on the plus sign at the bottom of the page, or really it'll work anywhere. And when it opens, you can type your answer and then click submit in the top right corner, or it may say publish if you're on your computer, just a heads up. On your phone, it'll say submit, and sometimes on your computer, it says published. It's a little weird. You can feel free to add a subject, you can color code your note, or you don't have to do either. This strategy is used as an opener. It's called a collective brain dump. It helps you activate your prior knowledge. It acts as a hook, collaborates between people, and you can help brainstorm and organize your thoughts. You could take this further by having students then, after they generate their ideas alone, they can talk with an elbow partner and then a larger group and then your entire big group if you want to. But for time consistencies on this and constraints, we're just going to generate ideas alone and then I will share them out. So you can access this by using the QR code, or you can use the link in the chat box. So Padlet is a great free interactive tool that really focuses on collaboration between teachers, students, people. You can use it anywhere in your education setting. And you can check with your IT department to make sure you can access this and actually utilize it, because sometimes they have network constraints or blocks that you can't access things on. All right, so before you go on a new trip to anywhere you've never been before, what do you need to do? So we have check the weather, we have investigate, learn about the place, look for interesting places, research activities, culture, etc. For a conference, I look at the agenda. Good idea. So there's things that we do when we go on a trip, right? So in teaching, to get anywhere, we have to know our destination. The desired results are like putting into your GPS before you leave where you're going. And yeah, you can get somewhere without putting into your GPS, right? However, it usually takes longer. You get some wrong turns. And as you know, in the world of education, time is always lacking. So having that clear destination makes sure that we can theoretically cover all the stuff we need to in our allotted time. So in stage 1 of understanding by design, we are getting ready for our trip. We're planning the destination, we're asking the questions, we're getting an understanding for where we're going, what we're going to be doing, what's the weather, what's the culture, what's our agenda, all the planning things we need to do. So to do this in our understanding by design phases, our components to this are essential questions, enduring understandings, and learning outcomes. This template is designed by Wiggins and McTighe and a couple other people who contributed to their book, and it shows the interconnectivity between pieces used in planning. It has 4 areas with prompts that you can utilize. So first we have established goals. Then identifying our understandings and essential questions. And lastly, what the knowledge and skills we want the students to acquire at the end of our unit, our course, at our curriculum, whatever you're designing this with. Firstly, I want to make it clear and point out that understanding by design is most effective when there is collaboration between different groups and people within the education system. It is not meant to be done by one person or one individual. That would be insanely overwhelming and not effective at all. Backwards design is goal directed. Also, we are trying to avoid what we call the twin sins and two big problems, which is aimless coverage of content and isolated, disconnected activities. Now, these may be really fun and they may engage the learner, but they can also distract the learner from what the actual point of what you're trying to teach them is. So, established goals are formal, long-term goals such as state content standards, district program goals, the departmental objectives, exit level outcomes, etc. The desired results that establish priority and instruction and assessment. Standards are typically known as content standards or learning outcomes. These goals specify what students should know and what they should be able to do in various disciplines at various levels. Standards can and should be used to establish these goals. However, I've been in education for a very long time, and as educators, we all know that many times the standards are too much content and not enough time. And this has actually been proven in research by Marzano and Kendall. Or sometimes we notice in standards that they're too specific or they're too vague. So how do we unpack these standards as educators to guide our lessons and our units and our curriculum? So here's some tips. Look at the recurring nouns and adjectives and verbs within those standards. Then cluster them into two groups, big ideas and core tasks. From there, make deliberate choices and set explicit priorities about what to teach. This will help your learners see what's important, what they should pay attention to, and how they should connect things without getting distracted. If available, look into what we call a list of transferable topics, and then ask questions like, why are we studying this? What's the big idea in this skill or this process? What's a real world insight that we could apply this to? And what is the value of studying this? Because those are all the questions your students are asking. Now, I taught at the middle school level, and that was the first thing they all said is, why are we doing this? Who cares? When am I going to use this? So it's important to note that core performance tasks are necessary and helpful to demonstrate this transfer of understanding that's occurred in an authentic way. So when your students say, what's the point? When am I going to use this? That's what they want to know. This diagram can help you have a visual to unpacking those standards. So we start off with our established goals. We're looking at the verbs, the nouns, the adjectives. We're putting them into two different groups. We're putting them into big ideas or core tasks. Then we can more easily manage that large amount of content that's thrown at us. Since educators can rarely cover all the facts and skills per topic in the allotted time without completely overloading you and your students, we need to group that information into big ideas that are transferable and help cover those topics and skills, but also connect them together because that's the end goal, right? We want them to connect points of knowledge. So big ideas are the core of the subject. They're enduring and they're abstract, but they are anything but basic. They're the linchpin to everything in understanding. So to give you an example, if you're doing a unit on ecosystems, your core idea might be natural selection. If you're doing a PE unit on offense and defense, the core idea might be spread the defense to open areas so the offense can't get through, okay? In skill ideas and areas, we're looking for those big ideas in what the skill helps you to do more effectively and efficiently, underlying concepts, effective tactics. So when do you use a particular skill? And why does that skill work? So if you teach a skill subject, those are going to help you identify those big ideas. To help prioritize your big ideas and core tasks, there's a useful framework that you can use. The outside of this circle is everything, all the possible content for your field of study. Inside the outermost oval is what students should be familiar with. As we move to the middle oval, we prioritize our choices by specifying those important knowledge, skills, and concepts. This is the prerequisite knowledge and skills needed to accomplish the key performances. Then the innermost oval is where we select those big ideas that are going to anchor everything together in our unit or our course or our curriculum. So once we have identified our big ideas, we need to identify the essential questions. The essential questions focus the student's attention on those big ideas and brings meaning to facts and skills. So they're provocative and open-ended. They're going to encourage critical thinking and inquiry. They will stimulate exploration of key concepts and connections. And good essential questions should reoccur throughout your curriculum, but also throughout the years. So if you're having multiple years of family and consumer science, you will see underlying things. If you're having math or science or a skills class, you're going to have underlying themes. In essential skill, our essential question should underline all skill mastery. So in a skills-based class, they can be framed around 4 big key ideas: key concepts, purpose and value, strategy and tactics, and context use. Now, I keep referring back to skills classes because frequently they're left out of our standards or they're not quite as done as well. The main core classes, your math, your science, your English, those core classes tend to be very well developed, but sometimes our friends in the skills-based classes get left out for a little bit. So how are we going to use essential questions? So here's some tips. To generate essential questions, use a combination of what we call overarching and topical questions. So overarching would be your whole curriculum, your whole course, and topical questions are going to be your unit-based questions. Neither are bad, but in combination, they're great. You may also need to use some guiding questions to help you get to those open-ended questions. You may also need to use what we call the Jeopardy strategy to come up with them. So you can come up with, let's say my answer I want students to come to is the 3 branches of government. What questions are they going to ask? Come up with those questions and then narrow them down from there to fit the framework we just went over on the previous slide. You can also use standards to help you identify your essential questions or your understandings as well. Once you have your essential questions, there's a lot of things you can do with them. So you can post them around the room. You can post them at the top of assignments. You can use them on assessments, and you should use them on assessments. You can use it as a formative assessment to check in and see where the kids are. You can share it with other departments and have cross-categorical learning. There's a whole slew of things you can do with them other than just they exist within my curriculum binder. Understanding is an insight into ideas, people, situations, and processes that are manifested in various appropriate performance tasks. To understand is to make sense of what you know. Why is that important? Why is that so? And use it in a variety of situations. You can transfer that knowledge to anything. It goes beyond factual knowledge to promote that deeper understanding we want students to leave with. And it serves the foundation for ongoing learning and exploration. So understandings are inferences that are stated as specific, useful generalizations that are typically drawn from the experience of experts. Now, students should be given that opportunity to draw the inferences themselves and emulate what practitioners and experts do when they generate those new understandings, because that's how they're going to generate them as well. They should be allowed to question, test, criticize, verify, repeat. They typically use facts or skills to focus on larger concepts, principles, and processes. Facts and skills are the building blocks to understanding. They help make connections that weave everything you're teaching together. Those facts are what are going to connect everything. They're your thread. An understanding is an inference drawn from those facts. They are also easily transferable to new situations, both inside and outside your subject. Using student misunderstandings and misconceptions is one of the best possible ways to find an understanding. Allow students to work through those misunderstandings that they have to generate those new ideas. Then they'll have true buy-in in their learning. Now, skills are successfully only mastered when they're part of a fluent and flexible repertoire that they can use in a performance. It requires their ability to judge what to use and how to use it in situational and knowledge. So units and courses that focus on skill development need to explicitly include understandings. The learner should know and understand what are the underlying concepts of that skill. What is this skill helping to accomplish? What strategies and techniques are going to maximize its effectiveness? And when do you use those skills? To help you craft an understanding, you need to first ask questions like, what specifically do we aim to have students understand by the unit/course end? What are we trying to get students to realize that's not obvious, but is actually really important? You may also be able to use standards, but sometimes they're not all well written. If they're not well written, you may have access to supplemental resources provided by some state or accrediting body. And be careful not to fall into the trap of the word and phrase, students will understand. But then you actually create something that's a skill. For example, students will understand how to use PowerPoint to create a presentation. That's a skill that will allow students to demonstrate their understanding, but in and of itself isn't a deep understanding. It's not bad, it's just not what we're going for. To help determine the worthiness of a possible understanding, try running it through the following filter. So start with your big idea, ask those questions, and if at any point you get stuck, you need to reassess because it's probably not a big idea. And if you get all the way to the end, you have your essential questions and your big idea. Now, lastly, we get to learning outcomes, also sometimes called objectives or learning goals. And many schools and districts and educating bodies are going to require you to have them posted in the room, on your Canvas page, on your LMS page, located in your curriculum documents, your lesson plans, and then notify students of them. This is because those learning outcomes specify the essential knowledge and skills and concepts that students should acquire. The definition of learning outcomes by the University of South Carolina is learning outcomes describe the measurable skills, abilities, knowledge, or values that students should be able to demonstrate as a result of completing a course. They are student-centered. They are not teacher-centered. They describe what the students will do, not what the instructor will teach. They should identify the key knowledge and skills we want students to know or be able to do. Now, there can be three different kinds of this. One, they can refer to the building blocks for the desired understanding. Or two, they can refer to the knowledge and skills stated or implied in the goals. Or three, they can refer to the enabling knowledge and skill needed to perform the complex assessment that you will determine in stage 2. Now, lastly, in stage 1, there are many types of learning goals, and most have a direct impact on positive learning. John Hattie's research on visible learning has shown that learning goals have an average influence on 0.5, whereas an average learning influence is 0.4. The important thing is that students and teachers are on the same page about what's being taught and what's being learned. These goals should be challenging, but within their zone of proximal development, which we call ZPD. This is where students are comfortably frustrated. They're not being unchallenged, but they're not so challenged they're quitting. The goals should be clearly stated and visible in multiple places, and they should be part of the assessment process. students should be given time to reflect and self-assess on these goals as well. Maybe a formative assessment, a summative assessment, an actual self-assessment piece, but they should have that time. Knowledge goals are set for what learning wants to occur. This is usually surface factual information. Skill and process goals are set when there's a set skill that needs to be gained. So in science class, I used to use these for our microscope unit. Understanding goals assess what big ideas will students understand and how will they be able to explain it in a never before seen scenario using actual evidence. And then habits of mind are goals that help make habits of skills used to act in an insightful and knowledgeable way when faced with a difficult problem. Okay, so now that I've completely talked your ears off for a couple of minutes, we're going to do a strategy called 3, 2, 1. So scan the QR code using your camera on your phone, or I'm going to post in the chat box the link to this Padlet. And give me a second. Okay. So this will take you to a tool called Padlet, which we just used, and it's going to be a 3, 2, 1 strategy. So 3 things you learned, 2 questions you still have, and 1 way you can use this in your current practice. Like you could walk in tomorrow and use this in your current practice. Now, if you weren't here for the last activity, you in Padlet just click the plus sign at the bottom of the page or really anywhere on the page.